Hi folks, John Dunn here, RPG freelancer, publisher behind Melior Via. I'm up here today at Immortals Inc. with Mikey.
What's up, John? How goes it?
Well, fall's starting to be in the air a little bit, right?
It is.
And I think that makes me think of the undead.
Really?
Sometimes, yeah. There's a lot of skeletons and creepy crawlies. I know, I mean, the Halloween stores are open now.
And everybody claims Halloween's a one-day thing. That's the complete opposite. As soon as September 1st is here, it is orange and purple mayhem.
Or at least orange and black.
Orange and black.
Usually.
Definitely not yellow. It's more so Christmas, which people still celebrate on September 1st.
Sometimes.
But anyways.
Yeah. So I thought we'd talk about a source book that dealt with fighting against the undead.
Okay.
And conveniently enough, I don't know how he got it, but Carlos got a limited edition copy of Lost Omens, Knights of Lastwall.
And why is this limited edition?
You know, I don't even know, because the book came out in April of 22.
Oh.
We're sitting here in late 23 going, I don't know how he got a limited edition copy, but because it's limited edition, it's still in the shrink wrap, and I'm not allowed to take the shrink wrap off to show you the inside of it.
And
Sorry,
we're selling
guys.
this copy here?
We are selling this copy. We only got one.
There you go.
So let's talk about it, though. So Mark Seifter, maybe mangling the pronunciation on that, my apologies, was the design lead on this book. It is a Paizo product, so there are a whole lot of other people who worked on it, from writers to artists to editors. Can't quite fit all of you in here.
Shout out you.
But Mark also worked on the Lost Omens World Guide that we talked about a while back.
Yes.
And if you remember that kind of gave us an overview of all the different parts of Golarion. Well, this book dives into one of the groups that's active in Golarion that are specifically active in one primary geographic region, but have kind of spread out across the continent from there. The Knights of Lastwall are actually only a couple of years old. They were formed after a previous group had things go horrifically wrong. So they're a fairly young group, but they've got literally thousands of years of history.
Young and hungry to rebrand.
Exactly. There you go. And they are devoted to fighting the undead and to spreading good. Did you see the D&D movie?
Yeah, I did. Watched it again the other night on Paramount.
Yeah. So the Harpers were kind of the central focus of the D&D movie. As I was reading through this book, I thought, wow, these guys very much feel like the Pathfinder version of the Harpers.
Okay.
And they're not identical. They've got a very specific focus, right, with fighting the undead, but they are also very much the good guys. Their real central tenet isn't follow this god or be this character class. It's help people, spread good throughout the world in really kind of everything you do. And that felt a lot like the way the Harpers were presented in the movie.
Yeah, it's a pretty great message. You're like, wow, okay.
And so they don't really have a specific central mantra or focus other than spread goodness. You don't have to be from any particular character class or racial background or anything to be a member of the Knights. They take pretty much anybody who's willing to commit to those causes of spreading good and to, fighting against the undead.
Will you be good? Good. Let's go.
Exactly. So the introduction kind of talks about that history, talks about that diversity that they have going on, and then it presents kind of the relationships that they have with some of the other Golarion factions, such as the Pathfinder Society, which is usually kind of the central group that campaigns are kind of assumed to be built around. It would be very easy to build a campaign that's focused around the Knights of Lastwall instead of the Pathfinder Society, and that's kind of the meat of what's presented here. The next chapter is called Among the Knights, and it talks about how they really are a pretty large group with multiple sub-factions, and that those sub-factions are a little more focused. One of those is the Shining Sentinels, who really kind of want to start another crusade. They want to get everybody working together to try and eliminate the major undead threat to Golarion. Then there's another group called the Crimson Reclaimers, who are a little more pragmatic, as I read it, and are focused on kind of immediate solutions to problems. And there's a couple other factions that are presented here as well. And we get a chunk on the key NPCs that are members of the Knights. And these guys really do come from a very broad range of backgrounds and classes. These include vampires and orcs, just as examples. So you got members of the Knights who are coming from just, pretty much anywhere you want. If it's clearly very easy to justify a PC coming from one of these different backgrounds.
So they'll let undead fight undead.
Apparently, yeah.
Okay.
Kind of wild, huh? As long as they're really devoted to the cause.
Now to go off track for a second, these undead that we're initially talking about, how do they act? Are they structured in different categories, or do they all kind of act in the same
so
undead
the
manner?
central guy that they're opposed to is a lich by the name of the Whispering Tyrant, who kind of amassed these enormous armies and really did cataclysmic damage to a chunk of the continent. The Broken Lands, I believe he's kind of responsible for them. So that's their main opponent, but they'll fight pretty much any baddies that they get in their way.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm scared.
A little bit. The other thing that's worth pointing out is that they don't have, a central single leader to the orders, though the different factions kind of do have leadership within them. Another thing worth pointing out, these guys, as I was reading through just the initial blurb, my reaction was, they probably have a religious bent to them. There's probably a lot of paladins in here, but they're not tied to a specific faith. Again, some of the different factions may have a particular sponsor to them, but the characters don't have to follow a particular deity. Next chapter after this gets into the options, the game mechanics. If you wanted to use these with these groups with another game system, there's plenty of meat here for that to be an option. Like if you wanted to use it with Pathfinder for Savage Worlds, or if you had a homebrew game where you wanted a group that would fit in, it'd be fairly straightforward to adapt these guys to another fantasy setting. But this chapter is really very focused on Pathfinder 2nd edition. You get some new backgrounds. You get more material for the Knight Reclaimant and Knight Vigilant archetypes. Now, those guys were presented in the Pathfinder 2nd edition character guide. So we are getting into material that you'll need beyond just the rule book. So you'll need the core rule book and the character guide to really take advantage of this material. There's also new feats for the Lastwall Sentry, who was presented in the World Guide. So that's another book that you're probably going to want to have before you get into this one as well. Then there's new feats for several other archetypes that are presented as well, and a whole chunk of new gear that's particularly appropriate to members of this knightly order, and some spells that, again, tie in really well with the knightly order. After that, we get into what's more or less the Game Master section. It's called Efforts, and it talks about running a Knights campaign or integrating the Knights into an existing game, either as PCs or as NPCs, and how the NPCs might provide some hooks to your characters for adventures. After that, we get into a chunk of the material that's adventuring in the Gravelands. So these are the areas that the Knights are particularly devoted to crusading against or even trying to reclaim. And then we get a portion of the book that talks about using the Whispering Tyrant. I mentioned earlier he's a lich who is kind of imprisoned right now, but has had vast armies at his command. And the Knights are very focused on making sure he stays in a position where he can't lead new armies, against all of the living. And it talks about the entire Eye of Dread region, which are these areas where there's a massive undead presence in Galarian. Lastly, it talks about Knights in Absalon, in the Broken Lands, and in the Shining Kingdoms. And then we get into a glossary and an index of the book. This is from Paizo. It's 128 pages. Like I said, we do have the limited edition version here on the shelf at Immortals Inc.
Do we have the normal edition?
We do not have the normal edition right now. I think if anybody wanted it, though, Carlos would be happy to order it in for you. This is $60 because it's limited edition, metallic print, shiny hardcover here. Full color interior hardcover as well.
Well said, John. I feel like these are great if you if you want to mix it up in your own campaign, just like that very charismatic group of people that are that give you hope.
Yeah.
Like, where am I in my life? And then you find these guys and you're like, Yeah, so well said. Hope you guys have a good one. Thanks
Till
for
next
watching.
time, folks. Good gaming.